The transition that a learner will make from being a child to becoming an adult member of the community is an important journey, one that requires a thorough plan to pave the way to a successful future. With that successful future in mind, it's important to begin thinking about your learner's transition to adult life as early as possible. A few notes before we dig in to the contents of this training. As I said, we'll be adding links related to what is being discussed into the chat box. Links will also be emailed to you following the training, so don't worry if you can't save all of them. We'll also be sending you a PDF of this presentation with the links embedded. Parents Helping Parents staff does not advise parents as to the nature of a child's disability or needs, nor do we recommend placements or therapies. We are not advocates or attorneys, but provide support and information so parents can better understand the special education process and their options. We're going to talk about a few concepts and then dig into the transition forms. When you see the forms, you'll be able to see how the concepts relate. In some of the concepts, I've included legal citations. Please don't feel like you have to know the citations. I'm just including them for the people who like to have them. We'll be using the form for SELPAs, which is Special Education Local Plan Areas 1 through 7 in Santa Clara County. Your form may differ slightly, but the information in this training is applicable to all IEPs and transition plans in California. We'll be covering the contents of the IEP Postsecondary Transition Plan. To understand procedures and rights that you and your learner have around IEPs and special education, I strongly encourage you to attend our training, A Quick Guide to Special Education and the IEP Process, taking place on March 12th from 10 o'clock to 11:30 a.m. We also have a full day in-person event on March 23rd from 8:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. titled Beyond the Basics, Empowerment in the IEP Process. That will be at Parents Helping Parents office in San Jose. The transition plan is an important part of the IEP and a part of transitioning to adulthood. For more information on the transition to adulthood, please check out Parents Helping Parents Connections California Hub on our website. You'll find a wealth of information there, as well as information on upcoming trainings on the many facets of transition and adulthood. Check out the transition timeline for an in-depth overview of different activities around transition for all ages. Our goals for this training, that you will leave this training knowing the importance of transition assessments, how post-secondary goals are connected to activities, community experiences, related services, and annual IEP goals, and what information should be included in the transition plan. Transition is a time to become an active participant in your child's IEP process, if you haven't already done so. Many parents start in the IEP process as scared, possibly somewhat intimidated. Metaphorically, over time, they start to approach the table. Transition is an ideal time to become a full participant and take your place at the table. Consider it your time to do a little driving and lead. Ask questions. Participation is empowerment. Life is much longer than school. Transition planning matters. Early planning for transition is important. The IEP is a legal document. It's in your best interest to know and understand the contents. If there's a box checked or something written in the transition plan or IEP that you don't understand, ask the team for clarification. You can also call us at Parents Helping Parents, and we can provide you with information and resources. All right, thank you folks for asking. It looks like we have a great mix of ages, 11 up through 18, and hopefully there's good information in this for all of you. So let's continue. Special education is full of terms and acronyms, and it's important to know the language. The more you use the terminology in IEP meetings, the better. It shows that you understand the different facets of special education, and knowledge is power. We'll be sending a list of acronyms following the training, as well as posting in the chat. Now, let's talk about what a post-secondary transition plan is. You may also hear the term ITP or Individualized Transition Plan used. The ITP is a term that is not in federal or state law. However, ITP has emerged to mean a written document designed to help prepare learners for a passage from school to post-school life. Fortunately, it's only 3 pages, so you won't look like poor Stephen here reading it. It's important to understand that the transition assessment, planning, and development of the ITP are part of the IEP process. The ITP is part of the IEP, which is a legal document. The ITP must be based on the learner's needs, preferences, and interests, and reflect the student's own goals. Objectives, timeliness, and people responsible for meeting the objectives should be written into the ITP and made part of the IEP. The ITP is a component or a part of your learner's IEP. What does the law say about transition planning, and when should it start? This slide spells out what is in federal special education law. Note that the transition planning must begin by the first IEP held after the learner reaches the age of 16, or earlier if appropriate for the learner. It's important to begin the transition process when learners are younger than 16 to ensure enough time to plan for and receive effective services. It's particularly important for learners with significant disabilities and those at risk for dropping out of school. Best practices say to begin discussions about transition in middle school and to continue and build on discussions so that transition assessments and a plan can be in place for age 16. That doesn't mean that things are locked in place, however. A transition plan is fluid and will likely change from year to year. This is just some more information about what the law says about transition. This is how it's defined in IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Next, we move on to transition services and the definition. Just like an IEP, services are determined by present levels, performance, and goals. And now we move on to components of transition services. As with any IEP, services and supports should be individualized to the need of the student. Not every student will need every component, but transition services may include instruction, community experiences, employment, and post-school living objectives and acquisition of daily living objectives. And there were examples under each of those. Again, you'll get these slides in a PDF following the training. Parents play a critical role in transition. Here are some of the reasons. Your involvement in the ITP and IEP process helps to support and prepare your learner for life. Educating yourself about the importance of and how you as a parent can contribute to the process will benefit you and your learner. PHP recently had a couple of trainings. One was never too early to start preparing for transition to adulthood. And the other was Parents' Guide to Creating Safe and Healthy Spaces During Transition to Adulthood. I mention these because they should both be available on the e-learning section of Parents Helping Parents website in the coming weeks, if you want to keep an eye out for them. All right, now we move on to the actual transition forms. This is the first page of the ITP. So let's break it down into 4 sections and go through each. So here's our first area up at the top of the page, page 1. First, you want to make sure that the student's name, date of birth, and the IEP date are correct. Now, school districts are working with many learners and many IEPs. Mistakes happen, so double check this just to make sure things are correct. Agencies invited. It's a good idea to have agencies present, especially if the services will be provided by agency. Some possibilities are the Regional Center Service Coordinator, Department of Rehabilitation or DOR Case Manager, Workability Case Manager, excuse me, Job Coach if the student has one. If the student is receiving counseling services, their counselor, and any other person or agency representative involved in the student's transition plan. It's a good idea to check with the IEP team prior to the meeting to determine who will be invited and who will be inviting those persons. Generally, parents invite the case manager from the regional center, and it's the district's responsibility to invite the Department of Rehabilitation. Again, districts are juggling a lot. And if you want DOR at the meeting, you may need to request it from the IEP team or give them a little nudge. Now let's discuss the middle left and right. Was the student invited? And describe how the student participated in the process. There is a lot of evidence about how beneficial it is to a student's self-esteem, self-determination, and confidence when they attend and even lead their IEP meeting. You may have heard the saying, nothing for us without us. And students actually should be invited to the IEP meeting. They, by law, need to be at age 16, but it's a good idea to have them there even earlier, if only for part of the meeting. Was the student invited by the person setting up the IEP meeting? This can be overlooked. People just assume that the student will be there. But the student's input on when their meeting is happening is very important to their sense of self. Age-appropriate transition assessments were used. Transition assessment is like other IEP assessments and needs to be comprehensive. Parents have the right to request independent educational evaluations, or IEEs, if they disagree with the assessments used or findings. Let's move on and talk about transition assessments. Remember, performing just one or one type of assessment doesn't tell the whole picture. Hopefully, multiple transition assessments are used. Interviews, interest inventories, questionnaires, etc., to reveal your students' strengths, needs, desires, dreams, and expectations. There is no one best age-appropriate transition assessment. It really is based on the student Consider assessment tools that provide for reflection, exploration, preparation, and meet the learner where they are. A well-written report will include information on where the learner is, where they would like to go, and how to get there. As parents, we're used to staying on top of things like speech, OT, and psychoeducational assessments. We need to be on top of transition assessments as well. Transition assessment should answer these 3 basic questions you see on your screen. They can also be ongoing, and plans will most certainly change from year to year. Ongoing assessment develops realistic and meaningful post-secondary goals, which can and will change. Helps with the student's self-discovery and decision-making. Increases student self-awareness and self-determination, and helps to develop a person-centered or person-driven plan, which helps your student plan for their life. There are many different types of assessments that can be used. These are just some examples. Again, we'll be including the links in the PDF sent to you after the presentation. This is a small sample of transition assessments that are out there. Please check with members of your learner's IEP team. School districts often have their own and other transition assessments. Now, we're going to continue on with page 1 and look at the student's post-secondary goals. Transition plans can contain goals in 3 areas: training or education, employment, and if needed, independent living. Just like annual goals in the IEP are based on results from other assessments, post-secondary goals are based on the results of the age-appropriate transition assessments and the student's desired outcomes. The gap between the results of the transition assessments and the student's interests is the basis for post-secondary goals. The specific areas of need to be addressed within the next year should be identified to assist the student in meeting the post-secondary goals. Again, there's 3 areas of post-secondary goals: training or education, employment, and independent living as appropriate. As you can see, all have the same fields. The team should review what the student plans upon exiting school. Areas of training or education and employment are required. As appropriate, independent living should be addressed as well. Each of the goals needs to be completed with a statement by the learner. Upon completion of school, I will. This could be in the learner's own words, or at the very least, approved by the learner after assessments are completed, and should be the result of the data of the transition assessments. Assessors are meeting the learner where they are, so there may or may not be scaffolding around these answers. The important thing here is to involve the learner no matter what the learner's abilities, and that assessment tools are chosen which match the learner's abilities. Let's focus on what other elements in the goal area with a close-up of the section, and after that, we'll look at a few examples. So focusing in here, these 2 sections, activities to support transition service and community experiences as appropriate, are very important and should reflect the learner's interests, be attainable, and observable by the person or agency responsible for the goal. Related services. This could be speech therapy around pragmatics or social cues, or OT to build core muscles or improve penmanship. If your learner is receiving related services, these services could be brought in and related to the overarching post-secondary goals. Now for the critical piece. And if you leave here tonight with nothing else, know that it is important to link the activities, the community experiences, and related services back to the annual IEP goals. This is how overarching ITP post-secondary goals become the goals that drive the IEP. Think of it as an essential triangle. We'll go over this again on the next slide. Remember that the goals and the activities, the community experiences, the related services, and the annual IEP goals may and will likely change from year to year, especially if transition planning begins before the age of 16. Finally, in this section, person, agency, responsible. Now, we've seen parent as the responsible party. It really shouldn't be. And it should be who's responsible for the goal, whether it's the school or a school staff person's title or an agency person's title. That being said, transition planning and the transition plan is a team effort. And as a valued member of the IEP team, parents may decide to take certain responsibilities on themselves, and that's okay. Let's look at an example of post-secondary goals, activity, community experiences, and related services tying it into the IEP goal, creating our essential triangle. This example relates to employment. Jordan likes working with animals and wants to develop his own dog daycare business. We have the overarching post-secondary goal with activity, community-related services, and then our IEP goal. Rather than read all of this word for word, Jordan wants to look for opportunities to increase knowledge of dog care and customer service, and incorporate the knowledge into a dog daycare business. So Jordan will interview and shadow people with experience in the field of dog daycare, secure a paid job or internship, and role play providing customer service at vocational placement. Then we move to the goal, where Jordan will demonstrate understanding of the educational background, job qualifications, etc. And there's measurable data there. I see a question in the chat. Yes, we will be sending the handouts following the training. Keep in mind that this is a snapshot. What is on this slide is a high-level summary of a transition plan. In the links I'll send following the training, I'll also include a sample transition plan that contained goals, services, and scaffolding that was created by understood.org. Our next essential triangle example is for education. Our learner, Noah, wants to attend a 4-year college and major in early childhood education. So we have our post-secondary goal of attending a 4-year college. Activities, community experience and related services that are around that. Interviewing people, identifying child care centers, interview for internships, and researching colleges. And then our goal is measurable with college applications, careers, and obtaining an internship. Our final example focuses on independent living. This is to help Eva participate in her living decisions, to focus on planning, shopping for, and help preparing meals. Again, our triangle of post-secondary goal ties into the activity and community-related services and the IEP goal. So Eva is going to participate by creating weekly menus, shopping for needed items, and receive some support in preparing. In her activities, she'll explore favorite meals, creating calendar menu. She'll help put groceries away, identify different options, and will also join the cooking class at school and help with meal preparation at home. And we have a goal tied to it that is measurable, with Eva doing some shopping with specifics. And Eva is also working at the grocery store while she does this. So moving on to page 2 of our 3-page transition plan. Let's break this one down into sections as well. The top of page 2, transfer of rights. This has to do with educational rights. At age 18 in California, learners reach the age of majority. This means that the learner will receive all information and make all decisions about their education. It is never too early to get learners involved in self-advocacy. Having your young learner come into the meeting at the beginning to tell the team what they think is working and what they would like to see is a good start. Learners are invited to IEP meetings starting at age 15 and have full education decision-making authority upon turning age 18 unless they are conserved, with the conservator retaining educational decision-making authority. Another option is that the learner can sign over the rights to somebody, usually a parent. We're going to post a template in the chat and send to you after the training that can be used to transfer authority to another person. Sue Sawyer, who is a noted fierce advocate of self-advocacy and recently retired from the California Transition Alliance, has written that when learners reach the age of majority, they should understand their disability, advocate for themselves, understand why they receive special education services, and participate and even lead their own IEP meetings. We spoke before about agencies. Any adult agencies that currently are or may support the learner should be identified here, as well as if a referral is needed and the person responsible. Sorry. Finally, on page 2, we have the course of study area. Now, this area is in a bit of flux at this time. You'll notice that the options up here say diploma or certificate of completion. Many districts are moving from a certificate of completion to what's called an alternative pathway to a diploma. There's guidance out there on the alternative pathway to a diploma, and rules are being put into place. Continue to check in for written information from your district as you identify the path for your learner. Job prospects increase exponentially when a student graduates with a diploma as opposed to a certificate of completion. There should also be a multi-year description of the learner's coursework from current year to anticipated exit year in order to enable the learner to meet their post-secondary goals. And there should also be documentation of the credits required, earned, and needed to help the learner. And finally, the anticipated completion date should be filled in. Now we're going to move on to page 3, and we're going to break this into 2 sections. This is page 3 is basically a checklist that helps the team show that they have followed the law around transition. It's important to see that a box is not just checked yes. You want to do things like make sure that goals are SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. It's not enough that yes is checked. You want to make sure that you have the data showing why yes is checked. I think, are we just checking yes here, or do we have something data backing this up? And you can certainly say things at the IEP meeting like, let's go back and make sure that, or help me understand. Any services should be spelled out in the plan. Again, ask questions if you don't understand any areas and make sure that the information is in the plan. Which brings us to the end of the ITP. Please post any questions in the Q&A box. To be mindful of the time of all participants, please note that this is not the time for personal, specific questions. Please drop a note in the chat requesting a call or reach out to us via the contact information in the next, or in a few slides. And we can touch base with you if your situation is specific. Once again, I invite you to explore the transition timeline for a detailed look at transition activities by age and to check out Parents Helping Parents Connection California site for more information as well as upcoming events. Patty, do you mind launching the poll? We would appreciate it if you took a few moments to answer a few poll questions. Your feedback tells us how we are doing, as well as providing information for our donors on how we are supporting families. Please add any questions to the Q&A if you haven't already. And we're going to add a couple more resources to the chat here. Actually, we're going to go back and we're going to do questions here. So we're going to give everyone a few moments here to answer the poll. And we'll get into questions. So one of our esteemed colleagues is here in attendance. And Alyssa, if you don't mind jumping on to help with a couple of questions, it would be greatly appreciated.
Sure, I'm happy to.
Thank you. This is Alyssa DiFilippo. She is the manager of our Connections California program. So our first question is, are you able to provide an example of a goal where a parent is noted as the responsible party? How does that work with goal objectives and overall attainment? And what guidance can be provided to keep districts from skirting their responsibility for a shared goal?
Okay, that packs a wallop.
It does. And it might, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say before I attempt to answer it, Patty, could you please elevate me to panelist status so I can also see the questions, because that'll help me as I'm talking to try and answer them fully.
There we go.
Great, thank you. Okay, so so I think the first part of your question was about a parent being responsible for a goal. And I'm not sure that that's what Karen said. I think she was talking more about a parent taking responsibility for helping with an activity or a related experience that is connected to the overarching goal and then loops back and connects with the IEP goal. Is that right, Karen?
That is correct.
Yeah. So it's not so much that the parent is taking responsibility for the goal. But I think the other part of your question, oh, I don't see it. Oh, you know why? Because I wasn't a panelist beforehand. The other part was, how do you hold a district responsible for shared goal?
How can guidance be provided to keep districts from skirting their responsibility for a shared goal? And I
Okay.
go go ahead.
So I was going to say, if we're really not saying that it's a shared responsibility for a goal, there really isn't a way for us to provide you guidance on how to prevent a district from skirting that responsibility. You know, the foundation of working on I should put my video on. The foundation of developing a strong relationship with an IEP team, right, is effective advocacy, the parent having effective advocacy skills. And part of having effective advocacy skills is being informed, bringing something of worth to the table, and also being grateful for what other people are bringing to the table. So I would say that it's not so much an attitude of let's make sure the district is not skirting their responsibilities for attaining a goal, but let's work together to make sure everybody helps to achieve this goal. And perhaps the parent's role is helping with scaffolding these activities and related experiences that are connected both to a post-secondary goal and an annual goal. Did I answer that well enough?
I think so. If the parent who answered that uh, has further questions, please post that into the chat. We have another question about questions 7 and 8. Now, I am assuming this is on page 3 of the post-secondary transition plan, that what are the typical ways that these activities are performed, so that there is evidence. And I mean, that can be, you know, that people have logged emails to showing evidence that the student was invited to the IEP meeting where the transition services were discussed, and or evidence that a representative of any participating agency was invited to the IEP team meeting. There can be emails, there can be call logs. It's like documenting anything in an IEP.
I just add to that.
Mhm.
How is the normal communication with your IEP team or with the district? Is it usually through email? Is it through text? Is it through snail mail? Is it through phone calls? Whatever the normal communication is, that's what you would expect the normal communication to be. And sometimes the districts might lag in adding that student's email to the invite for the IEP team. Or somebody, a teacher or a resource specialist might offhandedly just say, oh, your IEP meeting is coming up in, 3 weeks and you're invited to the student. And you might not even know about it. So it might not be a bad idea because, if it's not in writing, it wasn't said, right? So if the IEP is approaching and you're going, but you think or you don't know whether your student's been invited, shoot an email to somebody on the IEP team and say, my understanding is that before my learner's 16th birthday, they will have a transition IEP team meeting and they will be invited. Could you please send them an email? Here's their email address. Then you have that you're asking. And, ditto for if a representative from a participating agency is invited, because it does say there that they're looking for prior consent from the parent or student who has reached majority, right, who has turned 18, to invite these folks. So chances are you're going to get an email or you're going to talk to somebody. And again, if you don't get that email, reach out and say, I know that Noah is working with the workability person in your school or working with the transition partnership program person at your school. Could we invite that person to the IEP, please? So just be a little proactive.
Thank you, Alyssa. Great answer. Patty, would you like to jump in here and answer any of these questions?
Hi, Karen. Hi, Alisa. Yeah, sure. We have another question here. This about like how many benchmarks can a transition goal have? So, well, it like usually it depends like in the IEP, how many like progress reports do we want to get, like how we want to split this goal. Like we need to imagine like the little goals we want our student to achieve little by little, like any other goal, not a transition goal, like in the normal IEP life of the student. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that question was asking benchmarks with one of those overarching post-secondary goals of employment, education or training, and independent living as applicable. Because I don't think that those overarching goals really have benchmarks. But as Karen was explaining, it's important that that overarching goal is related not only to the experiences, community activities, community experiences, and related services, but also connects back in that triangle to the annual IEP goal. And the annual IEP goal is where you will find those benchmarks. So in a way, it's kind of all connected.
We have another question of, do you know where we can find some of Sue Sawyer's past presentations on transition and self-advocacy? So one of the links that we will be sending you is for the California Transition Alliance, and they do have past presentations under resources on their website.
Yeah, and you can also Google Sue Sawyer, California Transition Alliance, and maybe find some YouTube videos that have been posted. But I think the best bet is the California Transition Alliance, and just a moment or a second because of thanks and gratitude to Sue Sawyer. I just found out that she passed away about 3 weeks ago, and she was such a mover and shaker in the transition to adulthood world. I think without her, the pendulum would not have moved along as much as it has. So we're grateful for you, Sue, and we'll do our best to carry on everything that you started.
She was definitely a powerhouse and leaves really big shoes to fill.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Patty, do you want to take another one of the questions?
Yeah, actually, we had one question on the chat. So it is not on the question and answer question. It said, how will help Eva with the step, who will help Eva with the step number 2? Like, is it the family? So I think we need to come back to our presentation and check in detail Eva's cases. Like as far as I remembered, but I don't know if
I'm going to scroll back to that slide so we can have it.
Thank you. As far as I remember,
oh, here we go.
Or do you want to go deep on that one?
So in this case for Eva, you know, this could be a goal that is written for somebody that will need some type of supported living experience when they finish their post-secondary schooling. So it could be if Eva is living with her family that that she's helping them with cooking, or that there is assistance via you know, a group home or some type of um, you know, supported living environment. Alyssa, Patty, is there anything that you want to add to that?
I have to admit, I'm sorry, I was catching up and looking at the chat and the Q&A. So I only heard the last part of the question. If somebody give me a little summary, I'll see if I have any 2 cents.
It was just about who is going to help Eva in making the meals, because it says that she'll receive some support in helping to prepare.
Yeah, I think it depends on Eva's situation. You know, a lot of times on Friday, like on Thursday, a class might go shopping for food, and on Friday they all make the food. Well, then the instruction will be during the Friday when they make food for the class, or maybe for a couple of classes, or maybe for teachers. It could be a multifaceted. It could also, you know, one night a week, a parent or a caregiver or maybe an aide is going to help her prepare a meal at home, or maybe she's going to prepare her lunches in the morning. So I think this is a really good example of where many hands can be included in making that meal or making those meals with Eva.
So thank you. I'm typing an answer to a question here.
Yeah, me too.
Go ahead, Patty.
But by the way, well, another question was if we have some resources about student-led IEPs, and yeah, for sure, we have 2 coming events, trainings on this topic, and I am going to post it on the answered question. One is on, let me say, on March 26th at 6 p.m. and it is called Giving Your Child a Voice. It's exactly student-led IEPs. And the other one is on March 28th at 6:30 is Your Voice Matters. So both, we invite you to both.
So that first one on the 26th is for parents to learn about student-led IEPs. On the 28th, it's for students themselves. So please encourage and invite your learners to come. It's a great training. There's a lot of interactivity, and it's just real good if it's a good introduction if your learner hasn't gone to their IEP meetings, and it's a good second and third step, even if they are going to their IEP meetings, toward leading them eventually.
And as part of what we send to you is going to be the spring schedule of trainings and workshops for Connections California with Parents Helping Parents. But I will specifically, as well in the handout, call out these 2 trainings that were mentioned.
Yeah, and I believe that the included in the resources that are received, if you attend those trainings, is resources on student-led IEPs, which is what you asked for. You can also find resources on student-led IEPs in the Connections California self-advocacy page. So if you go to Connections California, yeah, there it is, the self-advocacy, click on that. You'll find some resources on student-led IEPs there as well. And did you want me to
Yes.
talk about, yeah, something, someone's asking about, she's curious about how evidence shows up because she's had a few ITP planning meetings and the proof has never been provided prior or during the meeting. And if it isn't asked about, then it doesn't get addressed, but it is marked as yes. So, I think that's why Karen wanted to emphasize, make sure that there is something to back up those little checked yes boxes. And, there are ways of trying to make sure that happens, by putting in writing and asking for those transition assessments, just like we put in writing and ask for those psychoeducation evaluations or, speech evaluations or OT evaluations. You as the parent can ask for those transition assessments. And the same way that the district has to get back to you with, a yay or a nay for doing assessments. And if you have a student in their 15th year, that answer is going to be yay. And if you have a student who's 12 years old and you want to start promoting that conversation about transition to adulthood, again, you're working on your communication and your advocacy skills with the team so that when you ask something, or better yet, when your student asks for something like transition assessments when they're 12 years old, they'll more likely than not receive them. And then when those assessments are performed, and as we all know, it takes more than just one assessment. So you want, at least a couple, if not 3 or 4 different kinds of assessments. Then those results exist. It's just a matter of having them put into the IEP. So perhaps, a week before the IEP or after the assessment is done, you send a little email, because remember, not in writing, wasn't said. So you send a little email. Oh, thanks so much. Grateful. Thanks so much for doing those transition assessments with Noah. Would you mind just sending me a copy so we could review them before the IEP meeting? If you don't get it because they're really busy, you understand that. Maybe you send another email a couple of days before, but then you just kind of just keep very proactively and very nicely and with gratefully asking, can I please have the results? And you'll see that the more you show that you're grateful for what the team is doing, the more you ask for these transition assessments to be done year after year after year, so you can track progress. The more you'll see the evidence piling up. And, again, we always want it in writing.
Thank you. All right. And then finally, the question, what if the team doesn't agree that a plan is achievable? Like they don't think the learner can graduate with a diploma?
Yeah, without knowing details on that, it's really tough to comment. But let me say, in general, the diploma track, certificate of completion track, and this new pathway to diploma, which there is legislation around it now, and now districts are working out how they are going to, what are they going to do to pave this new pathway to diploma, which may or may not take the place of a certificate. There still might be certificate of completion, and there could be this new pathway to diploma that students who would have gotten a certificate of completion could get this, have this new pathway to diploma. But it's real important to know this kind of early on, which is why, I'm pretty much an advocate for starting transition to adulthood self-advocacy skills, college and career readiness skills in elementary school. Karen actually mentioned the never to start too early. We had that presentation on Tuesday night, so give us a little bit to get that into the e-learning library. But it was talking about starting those skills early. But certainly by middle school, your learner, the IEP team, even a 504 team, if your child doesn't have an IEP, you want to be talking about what their future is and what their path is, because there are certain things that they're going to want to, certain coursework they have to take in high school if they're going to get a diploma versus a certificate of completion. Now, depending on your district, there may be coursework to get on this new pathway to diploma. Again, each district is really working on how they're going to achieve that new diploma. So we don't know, and we can't answer for all the districts right now, but that will happen. It will come. But suppose your learner wants to graduate with a diploma. They're going to need certain coursework during their high school years. So you want to know that at 9th grade. You don't want to know that at 11th grade. And if the learner wants to, go to a 4-year school, you're certainly going to want to know that going into 9th grade and not waiting till 11th grade. You're also going to want to, if you have a student who maybe could get a diploma or maybe could get a certificate, you're not sure, you're kind of in the middle, you want to be able to write targeted educational goals to help them achieve whatever it is they want to achieve, whether it be the diploma or certificate or this new diploma when it comes about. The accommodations versus modifications is a big deal in high schools, because when you send that transcript to a college, if they see a modified curriculum, the college admissions are, they're not so sure about a modified curriculum as opposed to an accommodated curriculum. And that's a whole nother topic, which I, already am 1 minute over the 7:30 clock on the screen. But I would recommend, if that is somewhere where you might be, where you're looking at accommodations versus modifications, call a resource specialist at PHP, and I'm sure that they're going to be able to help you out with that.
Definitely. Definitely. So thank you for attending. And Alyssa, I want to thank you again for jumping in here, especially, coming on camera and answering questions, short notice, very short notice. And Patty, thank you for being here with me as well. Most of our webinars, support groups, and services are free. We are committed to providing innovative, high-quality online content to families like yours. Please consider making a voluntary donation to help us continue this important work for families raising children with special needs throughout our community. Thank you. And just a few of the services that we offer. Thank you again for joining us. We hope that you have found this presentation useful and informative.